Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again. Now today I wanted to talk to you a bit about price checking your own item through the powerful tool that is poe.trade. Now what I'm talking about is this website here, which is essentially our online auction house for Path of Exile, and it's not owned by Granny Gear Games, and it's the best we've got, so I guess we have to get used to it. Now what I'm actually referring to is finding an item and then allocating a value or a price to it without having to message at Mathel, me, asking what is this item worth. Because 9 out of 10 times I'm not going to know what your item's worth without checking PoE trade myself. So you may as well skip the middleman, me, and check it yourself. Because for me to know exactly what your item is worth, I'm probably going to have to check on PoE trade and compare to everyone else what their prices are to then give you an accurate price check. So what I mean is you find an item, you want to know what it's worth, you go to PoE Trade, you compare to everyone else's prices roughly what your item is, maybe it's better, maybe it's a bit worse, and then adjust your price accordingly. So if you've got a much better item than everything else out there, you might want to set a much higher buyout, and then wait and see what happens with that. If you sell it rather quickly, well, shit, maybe you underpriced it. If it doesn't sell at all, you might have to lower your price just a bit for that item. But let's start by looking at some examples. So if you're running around in game and you happen to find a unique item, chances are it's worth absolutely nothing. 9 times out of 10 when you find a unique item, it's not going to be worth anything. And that's just because a lot of them don't really have too many uses, or they're just way too common, so you're not going to be able to sell them. No matter how hard you try, they'll bottom out at something like 1 alch or 1 chaos. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you found yourself a pair of Combs Roots. Now, if you don't know what the item is or you haven't seen it before, it's usually a good idea to check it, what it can roll and what can happen, what are the variables on your unique item, via PoE Wiki. Go to the PoE Wiki, type in the item you just found, which is Combs, fills in Combs Roots, and you'll see that it can either have 120 to 150 life. That's the only variable whatsoever. So now that you know that, you jump on your new best friend, PoE Trade, go once again, type in comb, it's going to autofill for you. Make sure you're on the correct league. I'm on Prophecy Standard, and then you search for it. Now, there's well over 99, meaning there's basically an infinite supply of these, and since you know that your roll is 149 out of 150, it's almost perfect. So that's pretty damn good. You'll probably want to sort the rolls by highest to lowest by clicking on the life roll here. That is the only variable. You can either click on that or on the price, and that'll go from lowest to highest. Click on the life roll, all of a sudden you have the best rolls possible. And turns out there's quite a lot of perfect ones, and they're worth basically nothing. So as you can see, they're worth anything from like 3C to 20C, depending on the corruption, since someone has been corrupting all these bastards. A non-corrupted pair is about 10C by the looks of it. And the life roll, since it's really not that important, anywhere from like 145 to 150, it's going to be basically the same thing. You can scroll all the way down those, and you can see they're worth about 1 chaos. So chances are you're not selling these for pretty much anything, nor are you going to sell most uniques for anything. But if you do find a really valuable unique, then you can actually go to PoE Trade and compare to others, and it'll give you a better idea of what you've got. So let's say you found a Taste of Hate. Once again, you're going to go to the PoE Wiki, you're going to check what a Taste of Hate can do, and you'll see that it can gain 28% of physical damage as extra cold during Flask Effect, but it can go from 20 to 30. That's something I just know from playing a lot, so that's something you may learn as well throughout all of uniques. You check your Taste of Hate, bam, and there's 10 of them. So they're pretty rare, they're pretty expensive based on the fact that there's not that many, and you can see that the rolls vary. The cheaper the flask, the worse the roll. So it only goes from 20 to 30, and you can see it goes from 3.5x, and then it starts to really climb. Now, they're never really going to be worth up to 6x, 4.5x, if 3.5 is the absolute cheapest, because you're probably just going to be able to buy the cheapest one for 3.5 and then divine it. Since a divine, you'll know after using PoE Trade, the currency market here. You want to find out what a divine costs? Well, you want to buy one divine for chaos. What do they cost? About 15C. So it's going to cost you 15C to try and re-roll this 20 into something better. And your odds aren't that bad of hitting higher than, let's say, 25, probably about a 50% chance. So 3.5 really should be the most value for money out of all of these. And that's roughly what your worst roll taste of hate will be costing. If you found a 30 though, then based off of these prices, you could probably sell it for about 4.2, maybe 4.5 at best. And of course, people list their shit without prices at all, and that doesn't tell you anything. You could also be one of those people that list it without prices, but I strongly recommend you set a price to whatever item you're selling, because these don't sell. People are only going to message you with lowball offers if they just don't think it's worth trying to buy the cheapest. You should always try and put a price to your item somehow so that you actually sell things. It really does help to move your items. So now that we've established how to find and price check unique items, it should be pretty straightforward for you to do. Let's move on to rare items. So something that's really common that I see from people that is a mistake is them telling me that I can't price check this, nothing like mine exists on the server. That's probably never going to happen. Unless you've found a really insane weapon, chances are something's out there on the server just like yours. You are probably just looking way too specific for the parameters of your item. So if I have this belt, which is actually pretty insane, if I search for all of these stats, like all 6 properties, there's probably not going to be anything out there like that. So what you got to do is search for roughly around about those stats. So for something like this, I would probably search for 30 plus to most resists, or a total of about 80, 90 resists, some energy shield, and a strength base. And then you go from there and you can judge what yours is worth based off of what other items are worth. So to do that, we'll jump back on poe.trade and we'll start searching for belts. You hit up belt, you'll go for your heavy belt because it's a strength base, and that is fairly important for some energy shield builds. And you'll start adding mods that you think are relevant to your belt. Now mine has something like 110 total resists, but you should probably limit your search to more like 90, because that means you'll have about 2 tier 1 resists on there, or maybe 3 semi, like halfway there resists. So you type in resists, and it says total elemental. So let's just type in 90. And then other important stats on the belt are energy shield. Now mine had about 40 I think, but you should only type in about 30. And if you really want, you can type in weapon elemental damage too, because it might be valuable to the item's price. And all of a sudden you have a belt. Now as you can see, mine's got 44 energy shield, about 110 resists, and 39 wed. But you don't search for those exact stats, you search for slightly under, so that you can actually look at the market and see what's going on there. Now right now there's this belt. It's pretty damn similar to mine, except it doesn't have a free prefix for you to craft on there yourself for the movement speed, but everything else pretty much damn near the same, and he wants 5x for it. Now it's one of those niche items that is going to be very specific, so you might even want to relax your search a bit more by checking only 80 to resist, because that means there's potentially 2 resists on there and another one you can craft on there. That still does nothing, and if you really need to expand that, that means online only, because I'm filming this at like 4 PM Australia time, which is pretty much no one online time except for Australians. And you can start to see all various types of belts. So you see this is a very similar belt to mine, and he only wants 10 cows, but 2 weeks ago means he might not even log on ever again. You really have to use your own best judgment as to what it's going to be like and how comparable it is to your item, but you can see you can actually start to get a feel for what this belt is worth and what other belts are out there in comparison. Now chances are none of these are going to be quite as good as mine, so you'll want to put it on the upper end of belts. This one, as you can see, is actually very close. In fact, pretty much better in every scenario. The resists are really nice and you can still craft movement speed on there. He wants 15x. That's probably not going to happen because he's just priced it so much further over everyone else. And, well, some things just aren't worth the maximum amount to fill out, because you can see that this belt is very similar to this one, except you can't craft that movement speed on yourself, and the resists are a little worse. So you got to ask yourself, is an extra 5 to each resist, maybe even 15, 20 to each resist there, going to be worth another 10x? Probably not, but who knows. The closer to perfect an item is, the more it will be worth, and this one is pretty damn close to perfect, I will say. But that gives you a good example for belts. Let's take another example, and something else that's quite comfortable to search for, let's say, are shields. So once again, do not fall into the trap of looking for exactly what you have, because my shield here is a 15% implicit spell damage base with a 65% spell damage roll. It's got 300 energy shield and 38 int as well as 1 resist. If you look for each and every one of those stats to be exactly the same as yours, you're probably not going to find anything like that. So you're going to look for a belt that's got 50 spell damage and let's say 280 energy shield, because 300 still really isn't that high, as well as maybe 1 resist. And you don't even really look for the int at all, you just keep that in mind because it adds to the total of the energy shield of your shield. So you'll just keep that in mind without actually looking for it. Now to do that, we'll cancel all of that again, we'll get rid of that, and we'll get rid of that. So we'll go back down into this, click shield, this is your energy shield tab here, and we'll say we want about 280 minimum. Now beyond that, all you really want to type in is your spell damage, because resists can always be crafted on, and I've only got 1, and you can basically gauge how much resists are going to add to the value of the item by looking at other people's items anyway. So if we do that, I'm still going to stick to online only for now. There's 21 out there, and the cheapest one out there is 1x. So without even looking at any of the stats, chances are your shield's probably worth at least about 1x. Now if you compare it to the cheapest one out there, same sort of energy shield, a bit less spell damage, and still 1 resist. But bear in mind, yours had int, so that's worth probably another 40 energy shield, and it had about 20 spell damage, so maybe it'll go even higher. And then you can start to look at other things as well, like there's a second resist, so that's probably worth a bit more once again, but this one doesn't have quite as much spell damage. I'd probably value it at around this shield's price. But you can get an idea just by looking at everyone else's shields and how much better or worse they are, and if some guys are absolutely fucking dreaming for their prices, or if it's rather realistic. Like this one over here, for example, has 300 energy shield, 1 resist, and 80 spell damage. Now compare it to the one for 1x, you're gaining 20 spell damage, 10 resist, and like 20 energy shield. Is that worth 5 extra exalts? Probably not. So once again, you're going to have to use your own judgment as to where you should place your item based off of these, but it really isn't that hard to find, at least once a league is established, as to what your item is worth compared to everyone else's, just because poe.trade exists and you can then index your item, and it ends up being pretty easy to do all by yourself without bothering your favorite streamer. That goes for just about every item out there. Some things are rather overpriced, but once you play the game for long enough, you do get an idea of what everything's worth, how to price it yourself, and eventually you'll probably be able to just look at items and know what they're going to cost without even needing to price check it yourself. That's just something that comes with shitloads of playing, but until then, make sure you price check it. And most things you should probably price check anyway. It takes a few seconds, and it's usually worth doing for you to maximize your profits. Now, if you want to just be playing the game, doing some sweet mapping and making builds, having fun, all of that, and not trying to build and become some sort of empire, then I do recommend you just price it probably on the lower end. Price whatever you find on the lower end of items and price them to sell. You want to just be able to move your items as fast as possible rather than try and squeeze every penny out of every single item, and probably only just try and squeeze those items for as much as they're worth, if they're worth a lot, or if it's a unique sort of item. Besides that, I do recommend you price it to sell and just move on with your life, because that'll be the most fun for you in the end. I hope that covers everything about price checking. I hope to have in the future a video more about identifying items as far as whether or not they will be worth something rather than what they're worth, just based off of how you look at them, what's on there, and what builds they could be used for. Mostly it comes from experience, just by playing a lot of builds and knowing a lot about the game. But I could also actually make a video for you guys that will last about an hour, just by looking at every single item, what it could be worth to a build based off of the stats on it. In any case, thank you very much for watching. I'm Matho, and I'll see you guys next time. And I figured I'd add this in real quick too. About an hour after I made this video, I went to do some running training down at the old track, and in Australia right now it is rather wintry. The track was hissing down with the rain. It's probably about 6 degrees Celsius at this point, since it didn't break a top of 10, and this is me getting ready to go out for a bit of a train. So just a friendly reminder, if it's hot for you right now, don't take that shit for granted. It could be worse. And this is me dead after training.